Morning. Good morning, everybody, on this seventh day of March 2022. And this is Victor Houston, original Oakland Black Panther, still politically active, a living legend, you might say. I'm 71 years old, going on 72 years young. And today I'm going to discuss Russia and the Ukraine conflict, but from a different perspective. A perspective that came out of the political ideology of the original Black Panther Party, which I have been a member since January of 1967. And although you always hear the opinions of the government, the US government, and others who control the mass media, I'm sure you're intelligent to know that there's always another perspective on things that's taking place in our world. And so I'm going to give you that perspective today. Okay. We're looking at one of the greatest moments of American hypocrisy right now. In the fact that many of you know, especially you who've been paying attention to the politics, the foreign policy of the United States, that our government has been the number one violator of nation sovereignty around the world. And 99.9% of this violation of sovereignty is always against nations of color. The Arab world, like the war in Iraq, America's invaded Iraq, killing millions of people under false pretenses that they had some type of nuclear weapons, which they didn't. They bombed Libya along with the French and killed Gaddafi. We can cite so many nations from Afghanistan, 20-year war, to Syria. We can go back to south of the American border, out on the Caribbean island of Grenada. We can look at the proxy wars organized by the U.S. through the CIA and the attacks on countries like Bolivia when they overthrew the government of Evo Morales. We can look at the destruction of the government in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and the list goes on. When we keep going back in the time, we'll hit the nation of Haiti when the Haitians killed a traitorous president named President Doe in 1917, and the U.S. used that as an excuse to violate the sovereignty of Haiti and send in the U.S. Marines, just like they did in Nicaragua, chasing Augusto Cesar Sandino, a revolutionary force that were fighting against the Somoza regime. So you can imagine the mindset of Putin, knowing how the Americans have done what he's doing in the Ukraine to many nations, not just one. And these nations weren't on the U.S. border. They were thousands of miles across oceans that the American military had to move logistics and all their weapons of war to attack. The country next to Russia is threatening Russian security, according to the Russians. There's no discussion of that. Now, regardless of how horrible it looks to see women and children dying and being bombed, don't get amnesia now and not forget that this is exactly what the U.S. has done. Robert Strange McNamara, Secretary of Defense in the early 1960s, lying about the Gulf of Tonkin attack on naval ships by the North Vietnamese, creating that war that ended up killing millions and millions of innocent Vietnamese people. Not to mention the invasion of the neighboring countries of Laos and Cambodia. Our government is the most criminal, the most aggressive, the most careless when it comes to respecting the sovereignty of other nations. They don't give a damn about international law or the world court. Never have. They believe in the ancient mindset thinking of the colonialist period way back in the 15th century. Might is right. that if they have the military might and they can pull it off, they're going to impose their will on weaker countries. Now they're bitching about Russia doing something similar, even though the Russians have more justification than when America went in and bombed the smithereens out of Iraq. We knew it was for the oil. And don't forget, they constantly trying to start a war with Iran. So we're not innocent. And all you Americans who are naive enough to wave your little American flag in support of patriotism for this nation, even when they do things that are criminal to other nations, you're just as guilty as the government because you support this action. Now, they're upset right now because white people are killing white people, and they haven't seen this since the end of World War II, since the Germans were killing other European nations. This is very upsetting to white America. They're not used to looking on the news and seeing little white babies with blood all over them in bomb shelters and basements. Apartment complexes being hit by missiles occupied by white people. They're used to seeing that in the West Bank, where America gave the weapons to the Israelis, gives them billions of dollars every year for war weapons, knowing they're going to use those weapons to kill Arabs and Palestinians. America has financed this illegal invasion of sovereignty against the Palestinians for decades. Oh, but that doesn't count. See how they have a double standard when it comes to foreign policy? They didn't give a damn about what the United Nations said about their invasions of other nations. They're going to do what they're going to do because they're able to do it. This is the reality of American foreign policy. So all of a sudden, everybody got amnesia, like they don't remember all of the nations over the decades or centuries, if we go back to the war against Spain and Cuba, that the U.S. military, along with their fellow imperialist partners like the French, like the British, like the Dutch, like the Germans, like the Italians, all the white European countries have always supported America in their wars. Remember, it wasn't just American bombing Iraq. The British was bombing them also, had their troops there. You see, so they really don't have the correct political position to be even talking to the Russians, to be trying to negotiate any kind of a ceasefire, because the Russians know very well America is going to give a damn about other nations' sovereignty, and to tell them that they're violating the sovereignty of Ukraine after all the nations that America has violated the sovereignty, this is totally hypocritical. Who would want to listen? Putin is saying, kiss my ass. I don't want to hear that double standard foreign policy bullshit coming from imperialist America. We're an imperialist country. We have been since the colonial days, since they stole this country. This is the thinking of white Americans. It ain't my culture that makes these decisions. Black people don't make foreign policy decisions in America. White Americans do that. So, now the Chinese are being very silent at this moment. But you can believe they got the Russians back. And America knows that. Because the U.S. has violated the Chinese sovereignty in supporting Taiwan. And in Korea, supporting South Korea against the North. So we don't have no political ground to stand on to be talking shit to the Russians about how horrible what they're doing by attacking the Ukraine. We don't have any position. How can we stand from a hypocritical position, if any kind of a position? And look at the news media completely leaving this hard fact out about all of the nations that America has violated sovereignty over the decades. None of that comes up now. They're not mentioning that. Oh, we did the same thing in Iraq. Well, we violated, we bombed the Libyans at smithereens, but that doesn't count as far as they're concerned, because they were killing people of color. They don't mind bombing Arabs, yellow people, brown people, black people to oblivion. So even foreign policy carries this American racism with it, wherever it goes. It's always taking into consideration race when they drop bombs on people. But white people are being killed now. And when they look and see little white babies with blood all over their diapers in bomb shelters, and they tell the personal grief, the stories of the Ukrainians dying right now, that hits hard all over the world to other white nations. But like I mentioned, if these were people of color, you wouldn't hear the dissent that you're hearing now from other European countries. They wouldn't give a damn if they heard more Palestinians were being killed in the West Bank, or if they decided to bomb Libya again, or any country where there's people with color on their skin. That's just the reality of the world. If you know the history of Europe and the crimes they've committed all throughout Africa. Look at the goddamn French. Look how many countries the French have invaded and bombed to this day. So why would Putin even want to listen to a French president? A president whose country has a history of violating the sovereignties of so many nations, especially throughout Africa, the Caribbean. Remember, the French was in Vietnam and the French was in Laos. 120 years they occupied Indonesia. It's just so hypocritical when you think about it. So if they want to flirt with World War III, talking about putting a no-fly zone up over Ukraine, let them go ahead. But I know they're not going to shoot down no Russian aircraft, because that's World War III. The Russians know they're not going to shoot down their aircraft. And for Zelensky to even have the audacity to want us to start World War III to protect Ukraine, he can kiss my black ass. I ain't fighting and dying for no goddamn Ukrainians. What have they ever done for me? I don't condone the fact that women and children are dying in the Ukraine, but I'll be damned to see this country and they're going to have black soldiers dying for white Ukrainians in a war against Russia. That's out the question. So we're not going to even think about that. So again, America is showing their hypocrisy right now. They're showing their hypocrisy in the fact that they have bombed and violated the sovereignty and crouched on borders for decades and centuries. And now they have the audacity, the nerve to criticize Russia because the Russians think that the Ukrainians have a puppet leader, Zelensky, and they're trying to develop that into a NATO ally right on the Russian border. How would America feel if somebody was armed in Mexico to our south, or the nation of Canada, and the Canadian president was a puppet for Russia, and the Russian was giving the Canadians weapons or giving it to Mexico? Just compare the situation being in the ball being in another court. And you can just see how insane it is, especially from a Russian perspective. So anytime you try to do international foreign policy and you're doing it based on lies and hypocritical analysis, you're not going to have any success. They're not going to listen to you. You think Putin don't already know the truth about American imperialism and all the nations that we've attacked? All the nations south of the border, from Grenada to El Salvador to Nicaragua, to overthrowing the government in Bolivia and La Paz, Evo Morales to plotting an attack to overthrow Nicolas Maduro down in Venezuela. Have you guys got amnesia all of a sudden? because the Russians are attacking Ukraine? Have you forgot about all the evil that we have done, that this government in the United States have done, along with their imperialist allies like the French, the British, and others, Spain? Those were the main actors that helped America attack Iraq. Millions of women and children dying over there. Oh, but that don't matter because they're Arabs. They're inhuman. Their lives don't matter. Just black lives matter. Arab lives don't matter. Asian lives don't matter. Huh? Central American lives don't matter. The lives in Grenada didn't matter. Syrian lives don't matter. Palestinians in the West Bank, their lives don't matter. But white Europeans dying? Oh, they don't like that. That matters to white people. When you kill white folks killing other white folks, when the last time we see anything like this? End of World War II? So they're very upset. That's why you see this great amount of support, because white people go support white people. Europeans go support Europeans. And that's another thing. You Americans, you white Americans, you're not white Americans. You're European Americans. Just like we African Americans, you're European American. You're from Europe. And when I see those images of all those children, the women, and the people in the Ukraine, they look just like everybody, white folks in New York City or any other place in America. They're white Europeans. And Americans put themselves in the place of these Ukrainians because they're white, just like them. And imagine something like that happening to them. So yeah, they're in support of the Ukrainian people, but they're not telling the world the truth, that Zelensky is a puppet, that they're trying to establish arms and things inside that country right on the Russian border. And the Russians ain't having it. And you see, I'm pretty sure there was lots of negotiations to try to end this puppet regime in Ukraine led by this comedian Zelensky before this war break out. But the media kept all that on the down low. So when this conflict broke out, you didn't know the background. You didn't know the history of how this developed till it got to the point where the Russians invaded. See, that's what's missing out of this conversation, is the history of Zelensky being a puppet for Western powers, imperialist powers, a country right next to Russia. As I mentioned, if this was happening in Canada or Mexico, we'd have the same concerns the Russians are having, because there's a puppet government, a threat to their security right next door in the Ukraine. And that's what's really going on. America's showing its hypocrisy right now, because we're the number one violator of nation sovereignty and have been for centuries. So, I want to thank you to listen to my perspective on what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. And this is the Black Panther Party Legend Show, hosted by myself, Victor Houston, an original Oakland Black Panther since January of 1967. I'm 71 years old, 71 years young. And so hope you share this video. Thank you for watching. And till the next time, when I bring up some other subjects that I want to discuss, all power to the people. Take care now.